So let's go ahead and start this video with a huge statement. Luka Doncic has had the greatest two-year start to a career in modern NBA history. His biggest competition for that accomplishment is LeBron James, who came into the league and put up incredible statistics right away and led a suspect supporting cast in Cleveland to 42 wins in his second season, a 25-win improvement from the Cavs' record in the season prior to drafting him in 2003. But that Cavs team didn't make the playoffs, while Doncic has posted more impressive stats in less minutes and has the Mavericks comfortably in the playoffs in a deep Western Conference in just his second season, albeit a weirdly formatted postseason in Disney World. Despite this, Doncic had plenty of doubters at the time of the 2018 NBA draft, and for a player as historically immediately impactful as Luka, that's kind of strange. How could such a talented player have so many doubters within the basketball community and be passed on by three different teams in the draft? That's what I want to take a look at in today's video. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about why Luka Doncic, a player that was clearly one of the best international prospects that the league had seen come into the draft back in 2018, had so many doubters at the time of the draft, and why so many of those concerns were simply ridiculous, even at the time. To do that, I'm first going to compare Luka's international career to other recent international draft prospects, then I'll disprove each of the draft myths at the time surrounding Luka, and finally make my case for Luka Doncic as the greatest modern international basketball prospect of all time. One of the main reasons why people doubted Luka as a prospect was simply because he was an international player, and that had a lot to do with some of the more recent international draft busts and just kind of this mindset that people had about international players. But as I'm about to point out, those concerns for Luka specifically didn't make any sense whatsoever. So let's go ahead and go in order of some of the more recent big international draft busts. Jan Vesely was the 6th pick in the 2011 draft, and in the EuroLeague from 2010 to 2011 at 21 years old, which is the second best basketball league in the world, by the way, he averaged a little bit over 10 points and 3 rebounds a game with solid shooting percentages in 27 minutes per game, and then washed out of the league almost immediately after being selected by Washington. The 5th pick in the 2015 draft was Mario Hezonja, who in the EuroLeague from 2014 to 2015 at just 19 years old, averaged around 7.5 points per game and assists per game with okay shooting percentages on limited minutes as well, and he had a little to no immediate impact in the league and has bounced around to multiple different teams. The 4th pick in the 2016 draft was Dragan Bender, who played in just 7 EuroLeague games from 2015 to 2016 at 19 years old with very low averages and played primarily in the Israeli Premier League rather than the EuroLeague before coming over to the NBA, and upon arriving in the NBA had a very limited impact on the Phoenix Suns and has bounced around to a handful of different teams. The 8th pick in the 2017 draft was Frank Ntilikina, who played in the top pro basketball league in France at just 19 years old and had some solid averages and shooting percentages at under 20 minutes per game. And now we get to Luka, the 3rd pick in the 2018 NBA draft. And in the EuroLeague, he averaged just 3.5 points per game, 2 assists per game, not very good shooting percentages, and limited minutes in 2015-16 at just 17 years old. On to the next season in the EuroLeague, 2016-17, his averages bumped up at just 18 years old in a league that is typically dominated by older players, averaging nearly 20 minutes per game and providing a nice contribution. And then at 19 years old in 2017-18, Doncic averaged 16, 4, 45% from the field over 25 minutes per game, won the EuroLeague MVP, won the EuroLeague Championship, and was named the EuroLeague Final Four MVP. The youngest ever Final Four and League MVP in league history. So it's clear that in comparison to the impact that they were having on their EuroLeague or general international teams at 19 or 20 years old, Doncic far outpaced any of the other recent international draft busts that people were concerned that he would eventually turn into. And by contrast, all of those other players' final season before declaring for the draft compares more closely to Doncic's 2016-17 EuroLeague season in which he was just 18 years old, rather than his final MVP winning season as a 19-year-old. So my point is, it should have been pretty clear that Doncic was in a different category as an international draft prospect in leagues that are generally dominated by older players, and then the players that come to the NBA and declare for the draft are typically teenage role players, while Doncic was the youngest MVP in league history. So now let's talk about some of the biggest draft myths surrounding Luka Doncic around the 2018 draft, and for me, there are two big ones here. The first was that Doncic was not a great athlete, and honestly, this might be an entire video in itself because we really do need to reevaluate how we talk about different kinds of athleticism. Was Luka a great run and jump athlete? No, he was not. He was not the fastest in a straight line either. But what he did have was elite body control and start and stop quickness. It is actually possible to be a great athlete and not have a 40-inch vertical. The way that Luka can control his body and change his speed and direction while translating all those things into a basketball move is one of his greatest strengths as a player and a sign of someone that is a great athlete. But nobody focused on his ability to do that even at his size. They all just looked at him and said, oh, he's an international player, he's kind of slow, so he's not a great athlete. And honestly, it was just a lazy evaluation of him as a prospect. For example, here's a comparison for you. Do you typically think of James Harden as a great athlete in the traditional run and jump sense? No, he's strong and he's physical, but he isn't a great traditional athlete, and he is still one of the best scorers and playmakers in the league because he possesses many of the same athletic qualities that Doncic does, and as a result, a lot of the people that were comparing Doncic to Harden prior to the draft are the people that ended up being right about him to this point in his career. The other major myth around Luka Doncic as he entered the 2018 draft was this idea that he couldn't shoot the basketball. And that was probably the only statistical flaw in his game coming into the draft, as he had just shot under 33% from three-point range. However, there were plenty of signs that that really didn't need to be a concern. He shot 37% the year before with less offensive responsibility and shot over 80% from the free throw line every single season. So yes, that could have been a sign that he would struggle a bit as an on-ball shooter, but off the ball he was at least average and certainly didn't deserve a can't shoot label. And this idea that he somehow wasn't a great shooter seems even more ridiculous now, because his ability to get into his three-point shot in a variety of ways off the dribble is one of the main weapons that he uses to be such a lethal scorer and driver. Now, normally this part of the video where I'm trying to make some big case for a player involves me pulling out a whole bunch of different numbers and comparing Luka to other international prospects that had a lot of success in the NBA and came from a similar situation. The problem is, there really aren't any statistical comparisons for how good Luka was at his age when he entered the draft. Drazen Petrovic, who went on to become a great player for the Nets before tragically passing away in a car crash, was incredible for Real Madrid in the late 80s, and his stats were out of control, but he was 24 to 25 years old at the time. Pau Gasol had an impressive statistical run in the EuroLeague in 2000 to 2001, but he was 20 to 21 years old at the time, and he only played in 6 games. Andrea Bargnani was a good player in the EuroLeague from the 2005-2006 season at just 20 to 21 years old before coming the first pick in the 2006 NBA draft, but his stats simply don't compare to Doncic's. And honestly, I can't find a single player in modern international history that did what Luka did at his age prior to the draft. Now, to be fair, scouting international prospects can be difficult, and we've seen players like Giannis Antetokounmpo and Nikola Jokic develop into some of the best players in the NBA with little to no sign that that would be the case when you looked at their international play. And the amount of variance that we've seen in the success of highly drafted international prospects is likely one of the big reasons that people had doubts about Luka. But as I've shown in this video, if there was ever really a sure thing international NBA prospect, it was him back in 2018. Which makes it even more indefensible that people had so many doubts about Doncic, but also that the Suns, Kings, and Hawks all passed on him in favor of other players in the 2018 draft, causing them to miss out on, in my opinion, a future MVP and likely one of the faces of the league for the next 10 to 15 years. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.